Welcome to Back from the Abyss. I'm Dr. Craig Heacock. Today's storyteller Kate reached out to me after last season's episode with Jenny and her powerful story of living in the hazy protective fog of chronic dissociation, and then coming face to face with the reality of a horrific childhood trauma. Kate also lived for many years in a hazy delusion, thinking that her life was quote-unquote perfect, but also having this vague and gnawing sense that just under the surface, that something was deeply, terribly wrong. This is a story of forgetting and remembering. This is a story of finding a therapist who was willing and able to sit through years of hateful negative transference and let Kate work through her parent-child wounds. And finally, this is a story of MDMA and psilocybin helping someone move forward through the minefield of trauma.
I was someone who was perfectly fine. I was just fine. I had a life that looked good, and I felt that I had had a really perfect childhood, better than everyone else's. I definitely felt kind of like a little bit superior, like I have everything kind of dialed in. I also felt like something was wrong, but I truly had no real way of explaining to myself why. I felt empty. And so really all of the, anything that I felt that felt off, I just sort of attributed it to the fact that I was like an empty person. Like I was somehow not real. Like I looked like lovely, and I looked like I had this, things figured out and a good career and all of this stuff. But I knew inside that I felt like there was just nothing there. And I had a lot of shame about that. Like I didn't want anyone to figure out that I was just like this shell. That's how I felt. Like I was like a shell that was just full of nothing.
Mm-hmm. Remember you said, Kate, in one of the correspondences we had that you felt like cats could look into you and see that there was nothing inside.
Oh yeah. I didn't like to be around people's pets because I really felt like they could just like see right through me. They could see that I was empty. They could see, Yeah, and there were other things too that sort of like pointed to something being wrong, but I couldn't like process that. Looking back now, I can see that there were things like I would have these really kind of like visceral bodily responses to things. If I saw something on the news about a child, something bad happening to a child, especially if it was sexual in nature, I would get so just like debilitated. Like for days, I would not be able to think about anything else. I would just have to like sleep all the time. I would feel in this sort of like panicked state. Another thing that was sort of maybe telling that something was wrong was that when my parents would be around, when I'd be with them, I would just feel like my throat was closing, like it was like clenching down. I couldn't speak. Or if it was like something was like pushing the words down, it was like I couldn't get them out. I just dealt with a lot of things by really sleeping. I would just get to this place where I felt like I didn't even have a name for it, but I just felt like my only choice right now is to go to sleep. I would like go lie down and sleep at any time. And then there were things too, like in college, I would self-harm in my own special way. That is a way that I haven't heard of anyone else self-harming, which was with a belt, which is its own whole kind of interesting story, I think, that opened up as I started to do therapy.
But you didn't know why.
I didn't know why. Yeah. It was that I felt like a lot of shame, and I felt this horrible empty feeling, and somehow it was like I was punishing myself for something, but also maybe kind of proving that there was actually something wrong. Something in me wanted to really maybe for it to come out that something was wrong, but it felt really hidden. And even from me, and like I just couldn't name it. I couldn't understand what it might be that was wrong. Just me. It was just me. There was just something wrong with me. It was the only way I could understand it because I didn't have any markers in my life to point to.
Yeah. In fact, the opposite. You said a lot of ways, like it's kind of perfect on the outside, like everything looks shiny and good, and you're doing all the things, but inside is just this emptiness and this shame and something. Around age 36, there was a fateful revelation that just broke everything open. You found out that your father had abused your daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was in some ways a total shock. And in other ways, like it completely made sense to me. I mean, the moment that I found out that our daughter told my husband what had happened, she was 4, I just instantly, like it was like I knew exactly what was going on. I was about to teach a class and I just sort of like continued making my copies. And, I was like walking across campus to go teach this class, but I could not be okay. And that was the thing that was different. It was like I had always had some way of sort of like coming back to being okay. Like I was just sort of flat. I could just sort of stay flat. But in this case, I just couldn't. I was like, yeah, something was cracking open. A lot of the things that I had felt and sort of noticed before, things that felt sort of off, I had attributed to hearing my aunt's story. So in my family, when I was growing up, my dad's sister, when she was in her 30s, started to talk about that she was remembering having been sexually abused by her father. The family's response to that was that she was crazy. This was at the time when there was a lot of stuff in the news around like quote unquote false memory syndrome and like therapists implanting memories into their patients. It was like on the news, it was just kind of in the public discourse at that time. And so that was really convenient for my family because we just used that. And I believed it too. I was like, oh yeah, she's crazy. But so then when I would have, these weird things pop up, like I'm afraid of sex and I'm so triggered when I see this stuff in the news with kids, like another way I explained that to myself was that this is because of my aunt. Like somehow her story infected me. But when this happened with my daughter, it was like I started to understand on some level. I mean, in the beginning, it was just like a pinprick of light. It was just like, oh, maybe there's something else going on here.
Yeah. So it wasn't that you consciously thought, oh, I was sexually abused. Or
no.
It was just that there was an opening with your daughter's revelation that this explains something about the emptiness and awfulness in me.
Yeah, it was almost like in this like subterranean way. Like there was something like lining up and I could feel it. But it was not something that I could articulate. It was not something that I could say at that point. Like, oh, now I get it. Like this happened to me too. That took a really long time. But it was there. It was like a path was like coming into view. And I was like, okay, I'm starting to walk down some path and I don't know where it's going. I don't know where this is going to end up.
What did those days and weeks look like for you after this revelation? I mean, what happened to you, to your psyche, to your body, to your mind?
Well, we had this trip already planned that we were going to go, to another part of the state on this trip. And so we went anyway. And I remember being in the car and driving, and I just felt like this sort of like frantic desire to die. Like I had felt, sort of passively suicidal, I guess, throughout most of my life. Like I just didn't care if I lived. I sort of had this feeling of like, when is this going to be over? Like, are we done here yet? But yeah, during that trip, I remember feeling like, oh, like I want to die now. And I had a bottle of Xanax, and we were in the car, and I just, like, something in me was like, eat that whole bottle, like eat it. And it was this voice that just like was really loud and persistent. And it was like, put all of these in your mouth right now and swallow them. And I felt like I would do it. And thankfully my husband was right there, and I gave him the bottle of pills, and I was like, please take these away from me. Like I can't have these. So also on that trip, like later as we were driving, I mean, throughout that whole trip, I was a mess. I mean, I was like a fucking mess. I was like creating all of my husband and I were like in this like continuous horrible fight because I was in fight mode. I was just like lashing out, like I remember being in the hotel room and I was so mad at him. I took my glasses and I like threw them across the room and like broke them. But we were driving back, and I had this moment where like I was just like looking at the landscape, and there was this like tiny little feeling of like, oh, like I feel like I am maybe like free now. Like my face just like, I had this like smile that like crept onto my face that I didn't invite it. I didn't feel okay with it. Like I felt like, why am I smiling about this? But I was like, I think I'm like, I don't know. It's almost like I was like leaving a cult. Like I had cut off my relationship with my parents. Like immediately when this stuff came out with my daughter, we grabbed our stuff and we drove and we went and stayed somewhere else until my parents left. They had been visiting us from out of state. And I never spoke to them again. That was the end. That was the end of our relationship.
Wow.
My dad died 4 years later. I had no contact with him again. I have not spoken to my mom since. And this was, 7 years ago. That was just the end. But in this moment on this drive, I was like realizing that I had somehow like gotten out of the grasp of something. And I was like, this isn't like, I think I can like maybe be something different than what I have been before.
Yeah. Speaking of the cult thing, again, in our writing back and forth, as we talked about this episode, you had said that your family was way into, is it est?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought this was so interesting. You said that, est is all about radical personal responsibility, no excuses, no victims, that, you are responsible for everything that happens to you in your life.
That's right.
And I was so struck by that. And then hearing you describe this now, that you broke free of the cult, like this sort of cult of secrecy, cult of not being able to point fingers or blame anyone because you had to assume responsibility for everything. Like that was the mantra, the cult-like belief of your family.
Right. Anything that I had to direct everything back at myself. That was the only option. That was the message that I got. And I saw the example in my aunt that when she spoke about it, she was cut off from the family. She was on the outside. She became labeled as like unstable and a liar, basically. I mean, that she was maybe more delusional. She had been infected by this like disease of false memory. So yeah, I just knew, it was just so clear that there was no way to look at any of this or know it within the context of my family. But as I stepped outside of my family, things became possible. Other ways of understanding myself became possible.
How did you move forward with healing, with therapy? What did that path look like?
Well, initially I still felt like, oh, I don't have anything that I need to go to therapy for. Like, I'm not worthy of it. It was kind of the way I felt. Like, I'm not worthy of therapy because there's nothing wrong with me, but my kid needs therapy. And so we started like getting help for my kid. Kind of along the way with that, like I spoke to a couple of therapists and I started to realize like, actually, I feel like I might need help too. But I felt like ashamed of saying that because I felt like I was almost like taking something that was intended for other people, like it's not, I shouldn't get therapy because I am fine. Like, look at me.
Yeah.
I'm fine. But like, meanwhile, I couldn't like walk to the playground without lying down on the ground. I just got into this place of this, like, I felt like I was so depressed and I just had no life in me.
Yeah. It's almost like your amazing coping strategy of being fine, which served you well in so many respects, like here was really hurting you because you were not well. I mean, you had to be well to survive what you did, but yeah, when everything cracked open here, it was very clear that there was this, like these different parts of you, the parts of you that was so unwell and the part of you who'd always been super well.
Yeah, it took a little while for the story to catch up with the reality. The story I was telling myself. Like, I held on to that for a while. Like, I'm fine. I'm fine.
So what did that look like, finding a therapist, getting into therapy? Because, again, you're describing so much ambivalence here. Like, maybe I'm empty and broken, or actually maybe I'm fine, and most people are more deserving. But it's becoming more and more clear that actually you need to do something. Yeah.
Well, I have a good friend who is a Jungian analyst. And so she connected me with a colleague of hers, also a Jungian analyst. I never would have chosen that, but that's who I ended up with because I didn't have the wherewithal to like shop around or like find someone for myself. In the first session with my therapist, at the very end of the session, she kind of made a sort of offhand suggestion that I just pay attention to any, dreams, but also just images arising in my mind during the day and just like keep track of them. And as soon as she said that, it was like when I was about to walk out the door, as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, well, there is this image that has been coming up in my mind over and over again this was like now a few weeks after everything that happened with my dad and my kid. So I left the session and I was like, okay, I'm gonna really focus on this image of this. It was like a lily that was coming up in my mind. And as I put my attention on it, I started to kind of remember more details. Like I was like trying to pick it. Like it was like, it had this like really like woody stem. And I was like, trying to like pull it and I just couldn't. It was like a difficult flower to pick. And I was young, maybe like 5. And then all of a sudden I was driving to Walgreens and all of a sudden I just was like having basically like a panic attack. Like I did not understand what was happening. I went into Walgreens, but I was like so confused. I didn't really know where I was. I was sort of like wandering around aimlessly, but also like my heart was like racing. I'm like hyperventilating and basically also having all of these other like body responses. So like basically like I was having like an orgasm and a panic attack at the same time. I was like extremely distressed. I couldn't hear. And somehow I like got myself back into my car and I somehow drove home and I just like slept. I just like slept hard. And I did not know I was like, what was that? Like, what was that? I had no idea. And I had an emergency session with my new therapist. And she was like, that sounds like you had a flashback. That was like a very important kind of turning point moment for me because that meant that my childhood wasn't perfect. That, something must have happened to me and I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. I didn't have a memory of it exactly, although pieces came in, images came in over the next few days, just flashes of things, enough to kind of know, that this was, I was picking this flower right before something awful happened. And so then having that name, that word flashback, like then I could look over my life and I could see like these other times that I'd had, basically was having flashbacks, but I didn't know that that's what they were. And even remembering that when I was like a time when I was like 6, that I had a flashback. Like I remembered having this same experience of what happened, that my dad was like picked me up and carried me into a drugstore and I didn't want to be carried. And then I had this like really similar experience of, what I now understand was a flashback.
I could imagine that could be both helpful and kind of horrifying to have your therapist identify that you've been having flashbacks. Because again, to put a word to it, like, oh, that's, now I understand. But just the idea of a flashback is that you're flashing back to something horrible that's happened.
Yeah, and like I didn't know what that could be. And so it was like the beginning of having to like rewrite my story of my childhood and starting to understand that I had some other childhood that I did not know about. Like there was some other kind of layer of the story that I didn't have like a narrative for. But I started to see that my body had been telling this story in various ways throughout my life. But I just didn't have any way of making sense of the messages.
What were some of the initial challenges that you faced coming to therapy? It sounds like pretty quickly, it's almost like her suggestion to just pay attention to, images and body. Like almost imagine like that opened things up for you. But how did those early weeks and months look with her? What did you have to overcome? Like, how did that evolve?
Well, the first several months were like amazing. Like I had this feeling of like, oh my, like it's happening. Like this thing that I felt that in that moment driving back with this little like smile that came onto my face of like, oh my gosh, like I'm getting free of something. It was like, that was like, I'm doing it. I had this feeling of like for like a few months of like, oh my God, I'm doing it. And like exploring all of these things. After those first few months, things started to get like harder with my therapist. I had felt like therapy was like dinner time. Like, oh, it's time to go to therapy. Like, this is going to be great. Like, I'm hungry and I'm going to go get some dinner.
I love that. What are we having today?
Yeah.
Ooh, pizza.
It was like exciting. Like a new relationship, I had like new relationship energy with my therapist. But yeah, at some point, I remember I was like at this farmer's market a few months in and I saw a woman who looked kind of like my therapist. And I had this like pang, this like horrible, like deep, like pang of like, why don't you love me? Kind of like of like seeing this woman and feeling like, oh, like you are so important to me. And like, I am nothing to you. Like you have the whole world and I only have you. And I was like, whoa. This is something that I should not share. Like, this is too intense. Like, I definitely can't say this to her. But things started to get really difficult in the therapy. And I started to really shut down and not be able to talk. And in the beginning, she would try to do things to help me. Like, she like brought in colored pencils. And she was like, okay, like, you can't talk. Like, what if you draw it? Can you draw it? And that just wasn't what I needed to work on. Like I couldn't feel safe with her. Like I couldn't do anything that she was asking me to do because the thing that I needed to work on was basically like attachment stuff,
Do you remember, had she talked about the idea of transference and with transference, what happens is as you get closer and closer to someone, these early deep templates get put onto them. So it's like you had sort of the honeymoon with her. She was caring and kind and wanted to hear your story. And then as she became more and more important, boom, down come the transference templates. Yeah. And do you remember, had she alerted you to that? Because again, I think what we're seeing is she became more and more important. You became more and more vulnerable, and she became someone who could potentially destroy you.
Right. If we had talked about it, I didn't understand it. When I started to have that experience, like it felt like I didn't have any way of understanding it except that like, oh, this is shameful. Like I'm like, desperately love my therapist, and this is like not how it's supposed to be. Like this doesn't seem right. So I didn't have that name for it at all. But then I would have this feeling of like all I can think about is my therapist, like all day, every day. But then when it's time to go to therapy, like I don't want to go. And I would be like 10 or 15 minutes late to every session because I was like dragging myself to get there.
Was it
like
fear?
It was like hatred.
Hatred of her.
Of her. It was so like I was all over the place. Yeah. And then I would get there and then it would be this mix of like hating myself, hating her, just confusion. And I started to just get in this like place where I would just be totally shut down. Like I couldn't talk. And that kind of deepened over time. I just like would not be able to move or speak. And then I would start to fall asleep in therapy. So, we would maybe be able to talk for a little while, but I couldn't look at her. I was like super withdrawn. And I remember at one point, like after a session, as I was about to walk out, like she seemed kind of rattled and she was like, maybe you just need to hate me. And I did. I hated her. Yeah. But I also desperately loved her. So it was like very confusing.
Just like a parent. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's so powerful. Like the reenactment, she became kind of this amalgam of your parents, like utter loathing, but desperate need for love and connection.
Yeah.
All tied up together.
Right. And I think that was part of this immobilization. It was like the equal forces of hating her and wanting to push her away and desperately needing her and wanting to connect with her. It was like I was short circuiting. Like I couldn't it was like it's almost like the two drives, like attachment and then like fight or flight were like firing at the same time. It's like the gas and the brake are being floored at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How long were you in that mode of foot jammed on the accelerator and brake, desperately wanting attachment, but fearful and loathing and panicked and also like shut down and sleeping?
Yeah. I mean, that really went on for years. There would be periods of time when I would sort of come out of it and suddenly could talk again for maybe a couple of months, but then I would go back into that. And really, truly, I had at least 100 sessions where for the vast majority of it, let's say starting at minute 5 for the rest of the session, I could not move or speak. And we just would be in the room and I would be in this state of incredible tension. This is not like a relaxed, like I'm chilling and like I'm taking a little rest and I'm just not going to talk to you right now. Yeah. It was like intense, like this huge amount of energy in me. And I'm just like this ball holding it in.
Mm-hmm. It's like 100 sessions where you're not speaking.
Right.
So I'm imagining, again, there's part of you that desperately has to be there. And there's a part of you that would rather be anywhere else in the universe.
Yeah. And so she tried all different kinds of ways to relate to that. I mean, I think she probably tried it, everything that she could think of to try to work with that. I mean, starting out with the typical therapist, like, oh, let's get oriented in the room. Can you look around and like name 5 things that are blue and like 4 sounds or whatever? And I was like, fuck you. I mean, I couldn't say that because I couldn't speak, but like inside of myself, I was like, fuck you. I'm not doing anything that you ask me to do. But also, please love me more than you love anybody else in the world. Another important event in my relationship with my therapist happened one day when I was meeting with her in her office. I had been in a period of not being able to talk again for, some number of days. And I decided to write her a letter in my journal between sessions about how I was feeling. And the next time I came in to the office, I wasn't able to convey, what I had written or why, but I was trying to hand her my journal so that she could read the letter that I had written because I was really just unable to talk. And she was in a phase of like trying different things to sort of help me break through this inability to talk. And so she was sort of trying, I guess, to take a stand. And she was, she said that she didn't feel comfortable taking my journal and reading it that she wanted me to tell her what I was feeling. And I really couldn't do it. And I was totally frozen, and I got really just this feeling of like intense hopelessness, and kind of this feeling of just the impossibility of ever communicating with her. And it was like the pressure in me was like building and building, and I was in this stuck state of being unable to move, unable to speak. All of a sudden, I just like exploded. I didn't know it was going to happen. I didn't know it was coming. I was holding my journal, and I just like threw it with like survival level force, just like a bomb exploding. And I was holding a mug of hot tea in the other hand. And it was like, I just started throwing things. I lifted the mug above my head and hurled it. The boiling tea like spilled all over me, down my back. So I was just grabbing, there were pillows around me. I was grabbing them, I was throwing them. And my therapist recognized the opportunity that I was actually expressing rage, which I had not done before, at least not with her. So she like actually came towards me, and I was like not there. I did not know what I was doing. I did not have any kind of like real control over myself. And I just, as she came closer, she was sort of, I think, trying to reassure me, to help me ground. Occasionally she would, if I was really ungrounded, at other times she would kind of ask me if she could push down on my feet with her hands, and that would help me sometimes. And so I think that she was sort of like, I don't know exactly what, but she was, she wanted to help me ground. But as she came closer to me, I just started kicking. And so she stayed with me in that session. The next session, she laid down a boundary. She was like, it totally makes sense that you need to do that. It totally makes sense that you have this pent up anger and that came out. And you can't do that in here. There is a place for that. It's just not in this office. I think what had happened was just that, like, she had kind of become my mother. And I was like, why? I'm trying to tell you something. Why won't you hear me? Why won't you listen to me? Why can't I get you to listen? Like, no matter what I do, you won't hear what I'm trying to tell you. And I think that's where all this rage came from. But in that moment, I actually felt like free. Like I was able to like move around. Like I was like, burying my head in the couch cushions and like kicking. I was like having a full on physical tantrum, like kicking my legs, like pounding my arms, screaming, like scream crying. And I just had like, snot all over my face. And it was a really powerful moment for me in feeling in touch with myself, in touch with my actual emotions and expressing them and not being this sort of facade.
Do you think during that time she ever interpreted the transference, sort of explained, here, Kate, I think what's happening right now is just what you and I were talking about? Or did she just sit with it and not actually try to make it overt? Does that make sense?
I'm sure that was part of the conversation at some point, but like really, because she was trying everything, probably, but it didn't matter.
Didn't matter. Yeah.
There was no like reasoning with it. It wasn't that kind of thing.
Yeah. You just had to do that.
I had to do that. I mean, that was the dilemma that I was in. And there was no other way around that. Like, it's not like I could have, like if she had done the right thing, that would have gone away.
Yeah. It's just amazing that you could hang in there for that. And it's maybe even more amazing that she could hang in there for that. I mean, think of that. That's endless hours and just sitting there in this like awful, frozen, panicked, love me, I hate you stew of terror.
Yeah. Well, for my part, I sort of feel like the poison was the cure. Like have always had this experience of like, I can't leave. Like, oh, I just met you in the grocery store. You're the, person checking me out. Like, we are now bonded for life. And like, I will be loyal to you forever and I will never leave. Like, I felt that way all the time, just like with people. And so I felt that with her too. It was like, I hate you. And yeah, I will never leave.
So were there some crux moments, some things where you look back in the years really of just sitting in that helped things start to shift? Or how did you start to move out of that?
I did an MDMA session, like my first MDMA session. And I had this experience for the first time, like as the medicine came on. I didn't do it with my therapist. I did it with a guide. As the medicine came on, like I had this feeling of like, oh, this is what it feels like to be safe. I don't know this feeling. I have no recollection of ever having felt this way before. And I could see that it was like, I was like filled with fear. Like it was like my whole body was like filled with this paste. Like I felt like I was a liverwurst of fear, just like my whole body.
But you'd been so immersed in it, you couldn't even recognize it.
No, yeah. I didn't even know that I was afraid. But in this moment, I could see like, oh, I've been afraid my whole life. And as my heart was kind of like opening in that experience, I felt like I wanted to say into the recording, my guide was recording, I wanted to say something to my therapist. Like I wanted to say like, I know it seems like I hate you, but like I like desperately love you. Mm-hmm. But I, even in that state, like I couldn't say it. And in like trying to say it, then this really dark wave came in and I started to like relive being raped in the session. And it went on for like an hour of just like my body was just like shaking. My whole body was shaking and I was like crying and writhing around and it was like years of this like pent up survival energy was like shaking out of my body. And I think that actually that was like something that was blocking my ability to connect with her. So after that MDMA session, like I became able to be allied with her. We started meeting on the phone after that because I had been in this pattern of like not being able to make eye contact with her at all for like a couple of years. Like no eye contact whatsoever. Like not walking into the room, not leaving the room. I never looked at her. But I felt like, okay, I could start to connect with her now after this journey. So I wanted to switch to the phone so that I felt like, okay, if I go in and I have this same pattern of not being able to look at her, I might go into the old pattern. So let's meet on the phone. And I started to be able to like talk to her and connect with her. Can
I just point out how fascinating this is? That in your telling, two of the key moves that allowed therapy to shift to a totally different place. One was to do the MDMA session, and two was to switch to the phone. Mm-hmm. It's just totally fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so then we would meet on the phone and, this stuff would still happen. Like I would still go into these states of shutdown. Like for instance, one time I was in my car and I was in this shutdown state. Someone called 911 and a fire truck came and pulled up and like, 3 or 4 firefighters came up to my car and like knocked on the window. And I was just in therapy. It's just like a normal day of therapy for me. So that stuff was still happening, but I also was able to like talk about it with her. And it became, like something that we could, discuss together and explore. Mm-hmm. Whereas before that was not possible. Mm-hmm. There was that like layer of connection just wasn't there.
What do you think specifically the MDMA session did that allowed you to connect with her in a different way?
I really think of it as like that survival energy of like holding in all of that, the fear the terror really of being raped was this wall that was between me and anyone else. It was like something that was like stored in my body that would not allow me to connect. And so when that like released to some extent, it wasn't totally gone, but like when it released to some extent, then it was like, okay, like there's not a wall between us now. I can talk to you and I can have some level of trust that just wasn't possible before. Then my dad died. And I was in a phase of not being able to talk. We're now meeting on the phone, and this would come in waves. There'd be like maybe a month or two where this would happen all the time. And I'm meeting with her like 3 times a week at this point. So I met with her either 2 or 3 times a week I've been doing that. I've been seeing her for 7 years. So it's a lot of sessions, lots of time to not talk.
A lot of checks.
A lot of checks. Yeah. Well, at some point my insurance started to cover it, which was amazing. But so my dad died. And a couple of weeks after that, I was in this state of shutdown. And like, I just felt like, okay, I actually have a choice here that I can let go just a little bit. And when I did that, something happened. Like, it was almost like whatever I was clenching down on, I was like, okay, I'm gonna just relax that clench the tiniest bit. And then this voice came out of me, and that was like, you can't make me do it. You can't make me do it. I'm not gonna do it. And my therapist was like, who are you talking to? But I couldn't answer her. And my body started to move in this way that was like, felt foreign to me. And that was the beginning of some kind of, felt like a dam breaking. Mm-hmm. Like all of this stuff started to come out, these parts started to come out and talk. And I really did not know who they were. And they would take over, like a part would come in, and then it's almost like I would be in the back seat of a car that someone else was driving. And I could see what was happening, but I could not control it. I couldn't make any decisions. I didn't really know what the driver was thinking. Like, I didn't know what turn they were going to take next, but I could watch. Yeah, these parts would come out and interact with her in different ways.
Through your years of work with your therapist, Kate, what did you begin to understand about sort of the nature of dissociation, and specifically how it may have helped you and how it may have hurt you?
So much of this process has been me trying to understand what is dissociation, because she introduced that word to me kind of early on. And my initial thought was like, well, I don't do that. Like, I could not see it. I had heard about it as being, like, oh, dissociation is when people are like looking down on themselves from above during a traumatic situation. And I was like, well, I'm looking back over my life and I can't remember any times when I was like flying around the room like Peter Pan. Like, that sounds like it would be pretty cool. And like, I've never experienced that. So over time, it's really this process of like coming to see the ways that I did dissociate and learning. I always felt like I just don't understand what this is. Like, in the same way early on, like she would ask me sometimes like, well, where do you feel that in your body? And I would just be like, I don't understand the question. Like, what are you asking me? Like, I truly don't understand the question.
Almost like you didn't have a body.
Yeah.
Like your body was offline.
I did, right. That's like the question was nonsensical to me. I couldn't compute. So I, over time I started to see like, okay, she would point out like, it seems like, you talk about yourself as not being real a lot, or feeling like you're not a real person, like you're a doll. And so I started to see, like, to learn, like, that is a form of dissociation, talking about, like, looking at the world around me and feeling like nothing was real, like feeling like I would always like blink my eyes to try to, like, I felt like there was something kind of blocking me. Like I couldn't really see clearly. Like I was looking through some kind of, like, I had like a plexiglass dome over my head that was like,
which
fogged.
Actually you metaphorically did. Like you were in this sort of cottony bubble, sort of sealed off from stuff to try to keep that little girl safe.
Yeah. So I started to recognize some of these things in myself. And it's funny that I thought of those times when I couldn't move or speak as beginning when I was in therapy. Like I thought, like, oh, I've started dissociating now. Like I'm starting to dissociate. Like I'm starting to, but talking to my husband, he was like, you've been doing these things for as long as I've known you. Which was like, we got together when we were pretty young. So it was like, 15 years. And I was like, I don't think that that's true, but I just had no awareness, but as I started to get awareness and see them, that happened in therapy. It's been a long journey of really understanding what dissociation is, and that it's not just like this fun game of like flying around the room.
How did your therapist address dissociation? Was she just sort of welcoming, like, it's fine, it can be in the room, it's happening? Was she trying to, I don't know, like, help bring you out of it, or sort of kind of pull you into the here and now? Or, I mean, did she have some kind of approach, or was it more just identifying and sitting with it? Because it sounds like you spent a lot of time with her in some kind of dissociated state.
She did a lot of just sitting with me. And I think she tried to name it gently, but I really couldn't understand it in the beginning. I mean, that's the nature of dissociation. It is made to hide itself. I feel like, that's been my experience. I've heard so many different, like, definitions of dissociation. And the one that for me makes the most sense is like unawareness. There are all these ways. I started to see all the different ways that I removed myself from life and from experience, so, one of the ways of talking about dissociation is that it's like kind of like being removed, being not present, being unaware of like what's happening around you. There's also a way of conceptualizing dissociation that's like things that are supposed to be connected are not, like memories are disconnected from the body, from thoughts, from emotion. And I like to say that I'm like a all-you-can-eat buffet of dissociation. Like I came to see that I did all those things. But yeah, I came to see too that one of the ways that I dissociated was through this kind of like fragmenting of myself and putting like emotion, different parts held different emotions. And it was kind of trippy to understand that, like, I, Kate, like my job is daily life. Like that's kind of what I do. And then there are these other parts that do different things. Like Emily ranges between 6 and 9. She can shift in age, be younger, a little older, but she really is, she loves and connects. And so like she like loves Michelle and has this like really nice, sweet, like connected relationship with Michelle. And occasionally like I've gone in to do in-person therapy. And those are often sessions where Emily will color with Michelle, like play with a doll, and always hiding under a blanket. She's very shy. And then there's another part that is just hatred. Like it just, like it kind of says just the kind of the same. It doesn't have a broad repertoire. Like in a conversation with my therapist, it will just be like, well, I don't like you. Don't talk to me. You're a bad therapist. You're stupid. And then like she'd ask me, like she'd talk to the part and be like, oh, tell me more about yourself. And this part is always like, I don't, no.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like a kind of pushing away. There are some parts that are just like nonverbal, really young, and that just are stuck in a moment of trauma and just act it out on loop. So there's one, I don't know how old, maybe it's like 3 is the feeling that I get. And it will, when it comes out, it just hyperventilates. It just like hyperventilates continuously. There's another part that I call no, no, no. And it just shakes its head no. That's all it does. There are some parts that like hide, like that when they come out, they'll just hide, like hide behind a chair or something.
Kudos to your therapist. It sounds like, again, she's been able for years just to meet you where you are, whether it's, refusing to talk or shut down in hatred, or now with parts emerging with these different characteristics and ways of being, and she's just in there for all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think she has said that techniques, whatever techniques she's learned, have never worked for me, for working with me. Like any kind of strategy or intervention or, like approach that she has learned even through consultation, of trying to work with me, that those things have never worked. Mm-hmm. And so
what's worked, I think, is the most basic feature of being a therapist, which is holding, which is just being in it.
Exactly.
Just like stepping in it, and no matter how awful or scary or boring or strange or unexplainable it is, she just sat in it with you.
She just stayed.
Endlessly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's a serious meditator. And I think that's kind of what she does. Like, that's what it feels like. Like, she is there with me in this state of like open awareness and compassion. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I think has helped the most has been when she started to kind of like meditate out loud almost. Like, I would be in these states of like not being able to talk, and she would just sort of like be in her space and not talking continuously, but occasionally just being like, I'm noticing that I'm feeling worried about you right now. I'm noticing that I'm not sure what's going on with you, and but I'm just here with you. I'm feeling my breath, so she was just kind of being there and almost like describing that experience of being present.
Almost, we would call that here and now self-disclosure. Like, in the moment, she's narrating her experience to you in kind of a self-disclosure way, but in a way kind of as a bid for trust or openness or connection. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Kate, how did you begin to move, into the here and now, into starting, to be able to feel positive feelings, negative feelings, to feel love and joy and suffering and everything? Because I think one of the big costs of chronic dissociation is that, yes, it's protective, but it just blunts everything. Like, it's like the ultimate fuzzy black and white TV. Like, you can see life, but everything is just not the way it's supposed to be. And I kind of imagine coming online from out of dissociation is sort of like getting back into high def color TV with all its, like, it can be kind of overwhelming. I'm wondering, what that looked like with your therapist, and then, ostensibly with your husband and other people. Like, how did you kind of wake up those circuits?
Well, if dissociation is unawareness, like, I feel like the process has been becoming aware. It's not like changing anything or trying to fix anything. It's like starting to see dissociation, to see and recognize when it's happening. Like, noticing, like I'm driving, but my experience is that I'm watching a movie of a woman driving. That's something that I never could see before, but at some point I started to be able to see that and starting to notice some of the kind of like somatic signatures of, for instance, a part coming forward. Like I would notice that my vision would really change. Like I would be in this sort of underwater realm, and sometimes my hearing would go out. Some of those things that I just couldn't really notice before, I started to become aware of. And a big part of that was coming to understand like two parts in particular that have these very specific jobs. And one is kind of like what I would call a gatekeeper part that just shuts everything down. It prevents anything from coming in and anything from going out. And I think that's a lot of what was happening in those years. You know, there were lots of reasons that I couldn't talk, and that was one of them. Is this part that was like, this is not going to happen. And so starting to see like, oh, this part is blocking something. Like something is being blocked. And sometimes I would be able to discover what it was that was being blocked, like working through this gatekeeper part. When it would finally let something come through, then I had this experience of like, oh, I'm not just an empty person. Like there's all this stuff in there that I just have not been able to access. It has not been available to me. I've been sort of kept on the outside of myself. And yeah, and then another part, which is I call the eraser, and it comes in and it erases like what just happened. So I could be having a conversation and kind of able to engage in the conversation, but not remember anything about like what we're talking about. And so this part, like I started to become aware of how much this part like wipes away any knowledge that would kind of alert me to the fact that I was dissociating, or to any kind of inconsistency in my memory. It just sort of like anesthetizes me. It really feels sort of like this lovely, I don't know, like drip of some kind of like amazing narcotic. So yeah, and then as I've gotten to know other parts too, like, and their emotions, like Emily's crying, for instance, like when she cries, it's like this really different way from me crying. Like it comes from like, I didn't know I had a diaphragm. I didn't know what a diaphragm was, but like when Emily, like when I cry, it feels like it's coming out of my face. Like it feels like the energy is like behind my face. And when Emily cries, it's like this like deep, like diaphragm, like gasping, sobbing. So, and then feeling like these other parts that express hatred. It's like, as I've like witnessed these parts from the back seat, I am also kind of integrating aspects of them into myself and like seeing like, oh, this is part of me. Like it's separate, but it's also part of me. And like, for instance, my nails right now are painted like fluorescent pink. One part that has come out occasionally is like kind of like, I would say kind of like bitchy girly. And this one day, this part came out, and I had planned, I was going to go like hiking that day. This part came out and it was like, fuck that. Like, I'm not going hiking. I'm going to get my nails done. So yeah, so this part went and like got a manicure, and like since then, like now I have this like joy of like paint. Like I love to paint my nails. Like it's like something opened up a little bit. Like it felt like, oh, this is really separate person. But then as those parts come out, they become, something is melding together. Mm-hmm.
You spoke a little before about how MDMA was helpful. How was your work with mushrooms helpful in this journey?
Oh my God. People talk about mushrooms. I have so much gratitude to mushrooms. Anytime I eat a mushroom, like I go straight to hell. Like straight to hell. Like I tried, my guide had read a study that said, 2 mushroom sessions, like 3 weeks apart, was as effective in treating depression as Lexapro. And I was trying to avoid going on an SSRI at that time. And I was so depressed. Like this was a period of where I really just was like lying down on the floor all the time because I did not have enough life in me to move, to like stand. So it was like going through life and trying to live my life and having to just like lie down on the ground all the time. And so we did these sessions. And so in the first one, I always start with some beautiful, like naive intention. And I haven't learned, I don't think, like, so in the first one, I was like, I want to meet my child self. And I had this idea that was going to be this like beautiful thing, like some kind of like beautiful reunion. But what actually happened is like, as I was starting to feel altered, my guide turned into a demon. Like he looked to me like a demon. And I was like, oh shit, like what have I done? I like crawled to the bathroom like desperately. And I was like trying to make myself throw up. I was like, I have to get out of here. I should never have come here. And I did not succeed in like barfing. So I was in it and I knew, I was like, oh, this is the feeling I've been avoiding my entire life. Like I knew the feeling, I knew it. It was like utter like terror. And he was there. He's the only person. And he's my protector, presumably, in this experience. And he was evil. Like that was my experience, was that he's incredibly dangerous. And so
I wonder if that was a transference thing.
Yeah. Now that's how I understand it.
Yeah, because I think psychedelics can just light transference on fire. So you're right, he turns it from protector into this, torturer.
Yeah.
The most dangerous person around.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I went into, like, I relived the ages of 3 to 7.5. In that time, I was like on his bathroom floor, thrashing around, completely disconnected from my body. Like I had no idea where I was. He told me later that I was like smashing my like body into the walls, into the cabinets, like thrashing around. And he had to like make me stop because he thought I was going to injure myself. I had no awareness of my body. But as I went in, like the first thing was I was 3 and I relived being raped. And then I came out at 7.5, which was also reliving being raped. And there was all this stuff in between that I couldn't bring back. Like, I don't know. I know that I relived, and I know that there was a lot in there, but I have no idea what it was. I couldn't bring it back with me. But as I was coming out, of that experience of reliving, I wasn't sure where I was. I thought maybe he was raping me. I couldn't tell. I started to become just a little bit aware of the room. And I was asking him, like, do you have sex with children? And he was like, no. And then I started to remember like that I had a kid, which I did, I was not aware of. I didn't remember like this life at all in that portion of the journey. I started to remember my kid, and I was like, oh, like I have to come back. Like I want to live because I want to go to my kid's birthday party. Like that's what I really, that's what kind of was my lifeline, I guess, to come out of that. And it was like I made a decision, like I want to be here. Like I want to live. I want to live.
Yeah. Just a quick note to listeners, any of you thinking about becoming a mushroom guide, just to know that, wow, things can be unleashed.
Yeah. And he said that in the beginning, when I was going to that place, that he was panicking, and he was like thinking like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Should I give her some ketamine? Like he was like, his mind, he was like spinning out. But he said that then he kind of calmed himself and grounded himself. And he was like, okay, no, this is exactly the thing. No one was ever with you for this. Like, I just need to be with you for this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one ever witnessed this. No one ever heard you. Like, no one ever knew that this was your experience. And so this is what I can do, is I can like witness it and be here with you.
Wow. I see what you mean. Mushrooms take you to hell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just
But ironically, like a hell you needed to go back to.
Yeah.
You spent, your psyche spent so much time and energy to trying to keep you out of hell.
Yeah.
But ironically, I think, yeah, you had to go back.
Yeah. And then coming out of it, it was like I came out into this place where everything was funny. Like, I was lying on his bathroom floor and my shirt had kind of come up a little bit. So my back was like on the tile, and somehow like when I was moving around, it made this like farting sound. Like, I was able to like make some suction with my back on the phone, like make these farting sounds. And so then I was like, got really into like making these farting sounds, and I just was like cracking up. And then, the rest of the journey became about like hanging out with him in his kitchen and just like, I don't know, like I felt like I was like doing drugs with my friend in high school, which is something I never did because I was too like perfect and lovely.
Mm-hmm.
But it was this like amazing experience of connecting with a man in this like fun,
Playful way. Through, all this therapy and the work with psychedelics, what did you begin to learn about memories, about trauma, about how memories and dissociation, how those all play together, but specifically for you? Because, as you talked about at the beginning of the story today, you had 36 years where so much was completely not available to you. It was just locked away in a vault.
I have like come to respect the amazingness of the human psyche. Like, it feels like there's some larger, wiser force that's making decisions about like how to manage this situation, and kind of putting this piece here and this piece here, and wiping away this one, and kind of hiding things. Like, I almost think of like a scavenger hunt kind of situation. Like, all of these things are hidden in these different places, and to protect, it was to protect me. So recovering memories has been this process of really, it's through my body. Like, the things that I know happened, I have learned by witnessing my flashbacks. Basically, like, I have these flashbacks, and then I can see what happened because of what's happening in the flashback. And I still don't have, like a super clear narrative. I just have bits and pieces of things. And I was really, really focused in the beginning on wanting to know the story, like wanting to be able to tell like exactly what happened, in what order, and like who did what when. And I felt like I wouldn't be valid or something until I could do that. And I also especially felt like something in me really wanted to prove it to my mom, because my mom didn't believe my daughter, and she didn't believe me when I did. I eventually emailed her and shared some about my own experience, and in some detail actually. And she wrote back and said, well, you've always been beautiful inside and out, so those things could never have happened. And so, so in a way, I think in the early few years, I wanted to have a story to tell that would be legible to my family and to my mom in particular, to be able to explain myself, and say like, this is what happened. And it's hard to do that with so many like fragments, and with body stuff, visceral responses, and, the hyperventilating or the hiding behind a chair, like all the terror of being in the same room with my therapist. Like, I can't tolerate being that close. You know, that was part of it. Like being in the room with her was too intense for me. You know, all that stuff, like how do I tell that to my mom and you know, make her understand? I certainly wouldn't tell her about any of the psychedelic stuff because that was a big story in my family. Like, these are the things to be aware of: false memory and psychedelics, because there was this story that basically psychedelics were the cause of the craziness in the family. Yeah, so I wanted her to understand.
That's so deeply ironic.
I know, those are like exactly and it's I mean, it's for a reason, I'm sure. Like that this was like some kind of fail safe.
Yeah.
You know, to like teach the children to distrust the things that might open up some understanding of what was really happening.
Right. Own everything yourself. Yeah, don't do any work with psychedelics, and recovered memories are bullshit.
And therapists implant. So also don't go to therapy and don't trust therapists because they will implant memories. And I really did think that for the first few years. Like, are these all false memories? Like, am I making this up? Yeah, I had to contend with that for quite a while.
Yeah. So Kate, where are you today? You know, what's gotten better through all your incredibly hard work of treatment and therapy, and also I'm wondering what you still struggle with.
This is a little bit of a hard question to answer. Like, I have so many different feelings about this question. You know, one is I feel like I should say that I'm on the other side, you know, and I'm like, quote unquote, healed, as if that's like a destination or something. And feeling like, you know, it's not so tidy as that. But something that's really different is that I have a sense of myself, that I exist, that I'm not like, I always felt like I was sort of like a figment in someone else's imagination. But I have a feeling now that like I am my own person, and I experience life from the inside out. And like, this is like my experience of my life. And that allows me to be in my life in a way that like I never, like I feel like I missed so much of my life. Like really, I feel like I wasn't there for it, you know, like.
As you said earlier, you weren't aware of it.
I wasn't aware.
You were deeply unaware.
And even, you know, in the experiences that my body was present for, and presumably I was participating in some way, like I wasn't there. And so that's what I'm like stepping into. And it's still hard, you know, like I have periods of time where I realize like, oh, I'm not really here. And that can be, I mean, it's heartbreaking to me now when I recognize that I'm going into that kind of mode. And I've been that way, like with my kid, for instance, but yeah, but I'm more here now, than I was. And that's a huge difference. And I also have this sense too, like before I really felt like this is a meaningless universe that we live in. And almost like I've had this feeling of like that the whole universe is like made of some like cold, hard material, like metal. Like the whole universe is made of metal. And it's this very unwelcoming, impersonal place. But having the experience of like having myself and who I thought I was like break down, and then discover that something really different was actually happening is, yeah, it's such a like, I don't know. It's like, how many other ways could that be true? You know, even myself now, like I just have this feeling that like a felt experiential knowledge that everything that I feel so fully to be true could kind of could open up, and I could learn that there's actually some sort of bigger thing going on that is actually a lot more knowledgeable than me, and that what I think is happening. And so that's kind of like has been a spiritual experience for me, like feeling like, oh, there's some kind of meaning in the universe. Like it's not all made of metal. Mm-hmm. So that's something that's different, and I just feel able to actually connect with people and not just like pretend to, but like actually have like a felt connection of like appreciating them and being okay with, someone else caring about me. It's still hard for me. That's, has been the most dangerous thing. Like that's the essence of my relationship with my therapist, is that this is a situation. This is like this place where I have the chance to really deeply connect with someone. And like, that's the whole journey has been like me like writhing and like contorting myself and like, thrashing around on the floor, like trying to like get out of it or just cope with like that I'm in this situation where there's like another person sitting in the room with me who's actually like looking at me and wants to know about me and cares about me. That has been like just terrifying. And so, but I'm learning how to sit in that space of connection that was so dangerous and intolerable to me in the beginning. And I know myself, and I know something of my history of this like this other childhood, like this foreign childhood that, somebody had. Like now I'm like, okay, like that was my childhood. Like I'm the one who had that childhood. So yeah, so it's a feeling of like being here and being able to connect, and that has really mattered, in my relationship with my husband and with my kid and even with my therapist. Just, it's still hard for me to say. Like, it's still hard for me to say, like, I care about you. Yeah. It feels like very dangerous, but it's true. And here I am saying it in public.
Yeah. What would be so interesting is to have a follow-up episode with your therapist.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, Kate, I just want to thank you so much for coming to do this. You literally traveled over 1,000 miles and to come sit with me here in Fort Collins, and the whole process of putting this together and talking on the phone and corresponding, and this is just a really beautiful little project that we put together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Kate started her story by saying, I was someone who was perfectly fine. I think this is such a powerful example of the protective quality of trauma dissociation. It covers everything up and stuffs it so deep down in the unconscious. The person can then endure and survive and move forward in their life, but at this terrible cost. The cost of being unaware, of living an unexamined and non-experienced life.